Hi, and welcome back to Entp Live. In today's video, I have something special. I'm meeting with Matt McKeever, who also is a YouTuber, and he's based out of Canada. Now, I came across his channel because I'm always looking at different real estate strategies, and I've been looking to move more into the multifamily space. And he has a nice series where he's documenting what you should be doing and how to go about that process. And then I figured I might as well reach out to him and try to get him onto the channel to share some of his knowledge and wisdom. And to my surprise, this guy is really killing it as far as I'm concerned. He started investing in his mid-20s and with college rentals, just like me. Since then, he's been able to grow his personal portfolio to about 80 units. And then he started to invest in large multifamily properties and has 43 units under management now and is closing on an additional, what was it, 25?
32, yeah.
Oh, 30, even better, another 32 units. And he also is in the tech space. He founded a company called Cashflow Tribe. And for those of you who are familiar with the Bigger Pockets network, it's a lot like Bigger Pockets, just for the Canadian market. And he's also developed some software for property management, right? So this is proof that from a simple idea of owning a college rental, that if you have your eyes open and you're paying attention, you could find a lot of different areas to make money, and you could start young. And there's really nothing holding you back other than a little bit of information and your will to make something happen. So anybody who's new here on ENTP Live, here on ENTP Live, we mostly talk about real estate, business, and anything else that I'm interested in. And since I am an ENTP personality type, that could be anything. So you might see me covering food, aviation, travel. You might even see me building some furniture. These are the things that I do in my free time just because I like it. So if those are things that you would like, please make sure that you subscribe, like, and leave your comments in the comment section below. So Matt, thanks for coming on. If you can, just let the people know how you got started in investing in real estate.
Absolutely. Thanks, Carl, for having me on. So the way I originally got introduced to the idea of real estate, I guess I've always been very entrepreneur oriented. So always had a side hustle, always trying to start a small business throughout high school and university, dabbled with things like a paintball field in high school and then a skateboard shop and clothing store in university. And in my fourth year of university, I was living in a house with a group of guys. And I think, like a lot of people, they naturally start doing some basic mental math. And you're like, I think my landlord's doing all right here. And so that was in the back of my mind. And then one of my roommates, his father was really wealthy. He was a successful businessman, had they produced like a tire company. So they supplied Canada with tires. And anyways, I just knew he was successful, and I knew that I wanted to be successful, and I knew that the reason I was going to university was to become successful. And I didn't feel like university was necessarily going to actually make me successful in that fourth year. So I just reached out to my roommate, Jake, and I was like, can we just talk to your dad about how to get rich? Because I want to get rich, you want to get rich, and I feel like neither of us know how to get rich. And so he talked to his dad, and his dad was like, read this book. And that book, of course, was Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And then he gave us like 2 or 3 other books to read. And at the time, the version of Rich Dad, Poor Dad we got had like an appendix in the back, which just had a giant list of books that he recommended you read. I just read every book that was in that appendix and just got hooked on the idea. I found Rich Dad, Poor Dad to really break down in such a simple manner for a basic beginner the importance and fundamentals of understanding assets versus liabilities and trying to build up passive income or stop exchanging your time for money. And ever since that, that was my gateway drug into real estate. It would take another 5 years before I actually pulled the trigger and bought a property and got into student rentals. But it was Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and just knowing that someone successful had recommended that book to me.
Yeah, I always recommend Rich Dad, Poor Dad as a good starting point because it helps reorganize your thinking about how to make money, right? Like a lot of people think, go to college, get a career, something like a CPA, something that's going to be, guarantee you income, be in need, that's respectable, and, invest in your 401k, work till you're 65, then start living life at that point, which is kind of bizarre to me. But Rich Dad, Poor Dad breaks it down in a way that makes it, easy to understand and even find yourself in that position, even giving you basic steps of look at the difference between my dad's thinking and this guy who's wealthy. And it doesn't necessarily mean one is smarter than the other. It's just they're playing a different game. right? So what
Yes.
game are you playing? So you got started with college rentals, right? And when did you determine that you're going to go into like more units and bigger developments? And what was that like transition like for you?
Yeah, great question. So when I originally started with student rentals, the primary motive was I was really focused on lean fire. The idea of create a passive income source that can cover your basic lifestyle expenses. And from that, I like to think of it as having a financial fortress of solitude. So if you can get to the point where like your basic necessities are covered, you can really start taking bigger, more interesting risks. So I started with student rentals because they were the best cash flowing type of properties that I could find here in London, Ontario, and just kind of bought a property a year. But my biggest frustration was it would take me a full year to save up the down payment so I could go buy another one. And in Canada, our financing likely is a bit different than the US. But in general, if you're dealing, we have like 5 main banks, like 5 big banks, and those 5 banks all have very similar lending policies. And around 5 mortgages, it starts to get a lot more difficult to continue doing business with those banks. But most Canadians are only aware of these banks. Like no one knows about the smaller lenders, credit unions, private lenders, vendor takebacks, things of that nature. So I hit this wall of 5 mortgages. I got like my 5 student rental properties. Things are going pretty well. I'm kind of hitting my lean fire number. But I was like, I know that people have more. Like I was like, I know that there's Canadians that own more than 5 properties, but I keep talking to the bank employee and they keep telling me like, no, it's impossible. I was like, there's just a big disconnect here. And so I struggled for a couple of years really just thinking like, I don't know, maybe the system's just rigged against me and I'm never going to win. And then I happened to switch offices as a CPA and got transferred to another office. And in that office, there was a tax manager. And one day my office overlooked the parking lot. I saw him pull in. He's driving a great big pickup truck. It just doesn't make sense. Like accountants are usually very frugal oriented. So why would you have a big pickup truck unless you got an angle? And long story short, I see in the back of his pickup truck, there's a for rent sign. I was like, either he just stole a for rent sign or this dude must be a landlord. And so I went in and talked to him and he was like, close the door behind you. I closed the door to his office and we sit down and he just kind of like broke down for me all the different creative strategies and approaches he had used to amass about 20 properties and he was only 10 years older than me at the time. I was like, oh my God, like someone had just like, let the genie out of the bottle or open Pandora's box. And I was just like drinking from a fire hose of information there. And for me, it wasn't that he gave me the exact strategies or tactics to be successful. It's just like, he was my Roger Bannister. He set that 4-minute mile. All of a sudden I understood this was very achievable and realistic. And so once I had like the confidence that it could be done, I started all of a sudden seeing all the problems or obstacles I came across and I'd find novel solutions for them or workarounds. And so after 5 years of student rentals, I moved into small multifamily properties with the BRRRR investment strategy. And again, that was the solution at first to my problem of trying to save up a down payment every year. Now I could kind of do a project every 6 months and I was getting more units in a short period of time. So that was fantastic. After about a year of doing the BRRRR, I had safely passed the threshold of my lean fire number, quit my day job. And once I had all that free time, it just became a lot easier to start chasing unique opportunities.
And I just want to cut you off for 1 second there, because it's something that you said that I want the viewers to really pay attention to. You need to have like actual income, right? Especially when you're getting started, because the banks are going to want to see that you're able to afford this house that you're buying, right? They don't care about your vision of who you want to be, right? They're going to say, is this guy qualified on paper? And the lenders that you go to are going to be very traditional in sense. They're going to be looking at your debt to income ratios. They're going to be looking at your credit score. So don't think that, hey, you just wake up one day and you start investing in real estate and you're making a bunch of money. Work a job and transition into that landlord, that full-time landlord role. Like I did it the same way. I was working overnights and weekends as a radiological technologist, right? So I could do 40 hours in the weekend. I could work overnights and I was making my money that I needed. I was good on paper. I could qualify for mortgages. And then I was using my day to kind of hustle in every other way. So I just wanted to just interject there to make sure that people
Yeah.
understand, use your, taxable income, your real income, to start building towards a point where you no longer need the job, right? And with real estate, you could get there pretty quick, right? Like,
Yep.
I think, most people can do all right on $3,000 of passive income. So once you're free from the job and you have nothing to do besides look for better investment opportunities, you start to really make much, much more money than any job would pay you. So thanks
Yeah,
you for
absolutely.
touching on that. Yeah.
Great points. And one little thing I'd love to build upon there too, for anyone that's new, that's just starting out their journey listening to this podcast, for me, the number one thing you can do to hack your life or hack your future is what's called house hacking. So the idea of like living in one of your rental properties, rent it out, get it to the point where you can live for free. Here in Canada, at least, the average Canadian spends about 30 to 40% of their income just on shelter. And so if you're spending 30, 40% of your income on shelter and all of a sudden you can get your shelter for free, that means you can now save 30, 40% of income. I don't care like how many lattes you skip or anything else. Like that's the fastest way to real savings. Plus it means you now need to spend less to survive, which really reduces your overall needs. So there's a compounding effect there if you can increase your savings ratio while you're trying to build up that passive income.
Exactly.
And so once I built up the passive income for myself and was able to quit the day job, all of a sudden I just found I started making more money in a single year than I had done multiple years previously working as a CPA. And that was just because I could invest the time and energy to take on more unique challenges and projects. And in general, the more unique the problem or property I take on, usually the greater the upside. And so the perfect example of that was right after I quit my day job. I got all the time in the world, so I'm scraping Kijiji. In Canada, everyone uses Kijiji. In the US, it's Craigslist. But scraping Kijiji
Gotcha.
and just saw a listing that said, looking for a part-time bookkeeper for a real estate investment company. I was like, I'm insanely overqualified for this. Like, it's literally laughable, but I was like, I'm going to apply anyways. And like on that, I, of course, did some due diligence. So like I took the email address, reverse searched it, found out that this guy was actually a big player in my city, but he was an independent big player, which was fascinating. So he had a piece of land here in the city, one of the most desirable development opportunities that he'd received multiple $20 million cash offers for just the land. And he turned it down because he wanted to turn it into a 2,000 family community. And I kind of like stumbled upon all this, sent him my resume and cover letter. I'm like, I'll work for free. I don't care what it takes as long as you're in the room. I was like, I don't care. I will work for free. I'll work 20 hours a day. If you're in the room with me, 20 hours a day.
I'm going to cut in there for a second as well. Like, I know that, right, I have a YouTube following that's smaller than yours, right? And I get emails and comments of, can you mentor me? And I'm like, no, because it's going to take me too much time to mentor you. And, I'm either going to charge you for it or I really don't have the time to do it properly. But I thought to myself, like, you know what, if these guys actually just came on board and said that they'll work with me and volunteer to do some aspect of what I do, whether it's project management or bookkeeping or something along those lines, that would probably be the best way for them to get into the door. So as you're saying that, you're like, wait a second, here's an opportunity for me to use my skills just to get closer, just to be in the same room and talking to you. It's a really good tip on how to like actually get yourself in the door. Because like,
yeah,
everybody says, yeah, go get a mentor, but anybody who's really going to be good at mentoring you, their time is very valuable. And it's like, and they've gotten that request before. And it's like, you know what? I need to get something out of you too if I'm going to be investing my time.
Yeah, there has to be a value exchange there. And that value exchange can take on a lot of different forms. You can literally just pay for mentorship. That's a thing. You can definitely do it. You can volunteer or offer your time or services for free. Like I've recommended to people asking me on like how they could try and develop a mentorship or like a mentor relationship. I'm like, you just need to figure out what that person values and try and provide, some sort of aspect that's going to allow them to get closer to that. So in this case with Peter, I essentially just offered to work for free. He got a real chuckle out of it because he was like, this is the weirdest application I've ever received. He's like, I got to pay you something. I was like, yeah, man, I literally don't care, whatever. He's a very frugal guy, so we almost settled on minimum wage, which my old coworkers would have really laughed about. But I just knew that what sort of conversations was I going to overhear if this guy owns over $20 million in land? And here I am at that point in time, like, you know, and he owned the land outright too, just for perspective. So like cash money type guy. And like, here I am with maybe at the time, like $1 million, maybe a little bit over that in net worth. So like, this was a difference in degree as far as the type of conversation, or a difference in kind, sorry, versus a difference in degree of the type of conversations I was going to be exposed to. And from that, you know, we built up a relationship. And another little pro tip, I know before we started recording, you mentioned that your audience was very like male dominated. My audience happens to be as well. And either way, it doesn't really matter, but both of our audiences are young. And what's really powerful about that is most people don't realize the successful older generation that's built up that real estate empire that you aspire to, oftentimes they worked really hard to get there. And so when they were working really hard was when they also had young families. And so they dragged their kids along, or their kids never saw dad or mom because they were building this empire. And so the next generation actually really has a distaste for the family business. And often I find like these older gentlemen that like, they're hungry to find a mentor because like they're not on social media. They're not getting DMs the way you and I get DMs. Yeah. And so because of that, if you take an interest in like what's one of their passions and hobbies and something that really allowed them to, you know, set their family up for success,
they're ready to gush to you.
Yeah. And like, they'll just open up. And that's exactly what happened with Peter and myself. And from that, you know, at one point in time, he turned to me and he was like, hey, Matt, you're good at this internet stuff. And I was like, yeah, I'd like to think so. And he was like, can you sell this one building for me? He's like, just post it on Kijiji on Craigslist and sell it for me. I was like, I'd love to, Peter, but conflict of interest because I'm the buyer. And he just like looks at me funnily and starts laughing. He was like, okay. He's like, what do you want to offer me for it? And this was like 20 bachelor apartments, one of the roughest areas of town. He affectionately and jokingly
bachelor apartments are like studios?
Yes, studios, yeah. And so he would jokingly refer to these as his crack houses. So like my city doesn't really have truly tough neighborhoods, but like this would have been one of the tougher neighborhoods, right? Like where you actually do have a drug dealer on the corner. And because of that, it'd been mismanaged for a long time because he had better things to do than focus on this one little cluster of buildings. Mm-hmm. And he was like, okay, make me an offer. And I was like, no. I was like, you just tell me what you want and I'm sure I'll make it work. And he said 400,000. I was like, yes. I was just like, yep, we're good. And he laughed at me. He was like, that was too fast. He was like, 450. I was like, deal. We shook on it and that was that. And like, again,
wow, let me just ask, like, what is the average rental income on one of those units?
So at the time he was renting them for $400 to $500 an apartment, but they should have really been doing 600 or more a month in rents, all inclusive. So utilities included. And I knew there was a lot of opportunity, but the problem was he just had the wrong managers in there and he couldn't be hands-on. So for like 3 months, I didn't live there, but I lived there, right? Like I lived in this little shitty office and like chased dealers off my corner, like demanded rent from tenants that didn't pay rent and got evictions and turnovers where necessary. And only spent like really, you know, shoestringed the budget and just invested a lot of time because I was a little scared because I just quit my job and I just invested a lot of money in this project, but I knew there was big opportunities. So we spent maybe $25,000 in renovations. So we're about $450 to buy the property, another 25. So call it even round up to 500,000. I knew there was
one. I'm sorry to cut you off, but one question, just so people who are watching who have never done a transaction before. So you got this property for 450 and 25K budget. So you got each unit for like 15K.
Yeah, like 20. Yeah.
Yeah. So you got each unit for 20K, and you're able to collect $600 per unit, right? Yeah. Which in my mind, it's $100,000 for every like $600 for every 100,000 to service your debt, right? Mm-hmm. So that's pretty good numbers. Yeah,
Yeah,
on a unit. So another thing is, how did you buy that property? Did you buy it all cash? Did you buy it with a mortgage? Like what were the terms of
yeah,
that purchase?
great question. So the property wasn't in financeable condition just based upon the tenant profile and the issues associated with the property. So I actually reached out to that tax manager that really like gave me permission to go succeed, that set that 4-minute mile for me. Reached out to him. I was like, hey man, I need $450,000 in cash. I was like, this is a screaming deal. I was like we're both going to make 6 figures off of this deal if you joint venture with me 50-50. Just give our partnership an interest-free loan on all the money necessary. And I was like, in under a year, I know I can BRRRR this and get the money out. I didn't know how good of a BRRRR it was going to turn out to be, but I knew
what was the number out?
So we got it reappraised. So again, we're less than 500 all in. It got reappraised in under 8 months for 1.13 million. So we essentially had created almost 600,000 in new equity. And it was really just a matter of like investing the time and energy to turn around the tenant profile and stabilize the building.
And then
like,
did you cash out like up to 70%? What percentage did you cash
so
out?
we cashed out at I think a 75% average loan to value. Immediately took that money and bought a 6-plex all in cash. Did the exact same thing with the 6-plex, then bought another 6-plex all in cash. And in under I guess it would have been under a year, we'd bought 32 units just in that one little corporation
And
off
now
of that initial seed.
You and that gentleman remained partners on the rest of the deals that you cashed out, right? So you didn't do the cash out refinance and cash him out as a partner, but you guys agreed that since this was a win, that we're going to go and keep doing the same thing. You know, that's not his main bread and butter, but you're the meat and potatoes of keeping it going, and you guys just pretty much tripled up your money, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in a year's time. So now he trusts you to keep doing the same.
Yeah, so you hit it right on the head there, Carl. In essence, the way I like to develop my partnerships is I start right off the bat with any money partner. I'm like, hey, I want to develop a serial long-term relationship with you. I don't want like a one and done transaction. So this is the way my business works. And it no longer works that way now that I'm kind of at a different stage. But back then my pitch was, okay, you're going to lend me this money. Like you're going to lend our partnership this money. I'm going to go execute the BRRRR. I'm going to do a perfect BRRRR. We're going to get all your money out. But you got to promise that if I get all your money out, you're going to give it right back to me so I can go repeat the process and go make you even more money. And most money partners, they're down for that. When you're like, hey, all you need to do is give me essentially access to X amount of money. And I'm just going to keep rinse and repeating this process. And all of a sudden, like a year later, you're going to own, have 12% equity and 32 units for free, and we're going to cash flow every month on top of that because I only invest in properties that meet or exceed the 1% rule.
And then also just to trim it down again for beginners, this makes clear sense to me because it's almost like just speaking English, as easy as that, right? It's understandable. But if I could say it in a very simple way, it's like the first thing that you need to do as a new investor, especially if you don't have the capital, is understand what your outs are, right?
Yes.
Are we going to get out of this because we're selling the property? Are we getting out of this by refinancing the property? Or is the win here just the cash flow that's going to be raised? We're not going to even take out any new debt, but this is going to spin off 15% cash, and your savings account is only giving you 1%. So like you need to be able to present those options and what it really means to the investor in that very first conversation, because that's where they're going to start to understand that you know what you're talking about. So if you can't clearly demonstrate what the exit strategy is, you're going to have a hard time raising that money. But if you could walk somebody through the story of this is the property, this is the value proposition here, here's what I'm going to do, and here's the out, and show them like either that you have relevant experience or at least the comps or the comparisons that prove what you're saying, those are the things that you're going to need when you're making, I guess, a compelling pitch to whoever's going to be giving you money. So just make sure that you know the information that's required and you know the language of this business. And if you know just that, then you're going to be able to raise money. A lot of people are terrified about going to strangers and saying, hey, put money here for this. The people who have money to invest are pissed off that their money is only generating 1% a year. You know, they're looking for anything that's going to make them more money than 1% a year. Like having money just sitting around in cash with no idea what you're going to do with it is a problem, right? Because your 1% a year is less than the 3%. You know, help me with the word here. 3%.
Like inflation or
inflation.
CPI?
There we go. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's your 3% inflation is eating your savings. So when you have money sitting around, it's a problem. So once you're able to identify people who have money, just talk their language and show them that you're going to be able to make them more than what they're doing currently, and you're going to be able to raise money from some of them. I mean, it's not like a home run. You're not going to walk up to a stranger and convince them on one conversation, but you're going to have to talk to a lot of people, and one of them is going to give you a chance. And when they give you that chance, that's the relationship that you have to exploit, just like Matt was saying.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. And one other tip I would provide in regards to raising money, this especially is true of new investors. You get really excited. You've got a deal, you've got an opportunity, you see how you're going to make money, and then you go and talk to a lender and you only talk about yourself and how you feel. And you're like, I'm going to make so much money on this deal. I'm so excited. This is a great opportunity. And the entire time the lender's just wondering, like, does this guy even care about me? Like, what's in it for me? And so it's really important we put ourselves in that lender's shoe. And most lenders, especially if we're talking about private lenders that aren't actively in the business of just being private lenders, their primary focus is one, like if you're turning to say friends and family for funds, you know, they want to support you, so they want to help. So they already have good intentions. But secondly, it's often less about how much money you're going to make. And they just want to make sure that you're not going to lose their money. So they want to make sure you're going to be a great steward of their money. And so building upon what Carl was saying there, having multiple exit strategies and having a plan B and C is so important to provide comfort to that potential person, that potential lender. So yeah.
So I've never invested in Canada. And sometimes when I'm looking at like international markets, I always feel like it's not worth it for me to invest for cash flow. Like I have an investment in Medellin, Colombia. It doesn't do too well. I'm buying a property in Italy now, but it's like one of those Euro deals. So, you know, I'm buying it super cheap. So it doesn't really matter to me. It's kind of just like a pet project. But when I look at the international numbers, they're just not as good as the States. So if you can, like, what can somebody expect as a rate of return or a capitalization rate on these rental properties in Canada?
Yeah, great question. So I'm going to break Canada into 3 primary markets. So we're going to have like our major metro cities that, at least to Canadians, include world-class cities. So that's really going to be Vancouver and Toronto. And maybe some people are going to argue Montreal. In those cases, those 3 cities, you're probably only looking at a 3, 4, maybe a 5 cap rate. So very low on the spectrum. And the way most Canadians are rationalizing that is they view that as our true world-class cities. So whether you believe it or not, a lot of Canadians will say in the sentence, Toronto is a New York, it's a London, England, it's a Paris, you know, it's a Tokyo, it's a Hong Kong. And so that's kind of the view and rationalization Canadians use. Then we've got like, you know, just large metro, again, Canadian metro areas. So I'm talking about cities of a population of over 100 or 200,000. In those markets, we're likely going to be looking at anywhere from a 4.5, 5 cap rate up to maybe a 6 or a 7 cap rate. And then once we get into like smaller tertiary markets that are small communities, maybe communities up north that are a 1 or 2 industry town, you then are going to start to see the 7, 8, 12, maybe even as high as like a 15 cap. But that's going to top out. In general, anywhere in Canada where you're getting double-digit cap returns, unless it's a unique opportunity, I would be hesitant because I think that reflects the market in general. So you're either going to see high vacancies, low tenant profiles, or something, or a combination of both.
Now, what's the sweet spot for you?
For me, the sweet spot is in these like mid-sized cities. So the cities of like London, Ontario, Windsor, Ontario. Here, I can buy properties that like I can buy them at a 4 or 5 cap with real value add opportunities. We've gone through a real affordability crisis and crunch here. So we have like 2% vacancy rates in these markets. So a lot of the, like, if you rented out a property in 2015, you can probably rent it out for 20 to 40% more now in 2020. So there's huge value add opportunities if you can generate that tenant turnover. So for me, once we're done and we're restabilized based upon our initial acquisition costs, we're probably looking at a property that's in the 7, 8, maybe even flirting with the 9 cap range. But that's like, you know, we've renovated now, it's stabilized, the tenant profile is up, and we're just going to walk away, and it's like a nice turnkey rental for us.
Gotcha. So just to be clear with with cap rate, the cap rate is the profit like, so if you bought a property for $1 million, an 8% cap rate would be that property cash flows $80,000 a year, not including a mortgage, right?
Yeah.
So the game that I like to play and like to think about is, what is the capitalization rate versus my mortgage interest rate, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm getting my mortgage at 4%, for example, and it's an 8 cap property, then I'm making 4% spread, right? So then it's a matter of, well, how big of an asset can I purchase? Because what is that 4% going to be for me, right? If it's $5 million, that's $200,000 spread for me per year. So that's why I kind of wanted to touch on that, and also explain to people like why you're going to want to know what the rate of return is going to be on an asset, so that you can really figure out where the money gap is, right? The money gap is going to be between how the property performs and what the mortgage is, and of course, you know, the down payment that's free and clear.
Mm-hmm.
One quick question to piggyback off of that. So what are like the loan to value ratios that you're seeing in Canada? Is it for like commercial multifamily? Is it 75%?
So for commercial multifamily, we're probably looking anywhere from traditionally you're going to be looking 65 to 75% loan to value for financing. You can get certain insured products for large multifamilies and potentially take as high as 85% loan to value. Okay. In general, though, those are going to be the exceptions and not the rule.
So 65 to 75%.
Yeah.
See, and the way that you described it, your cap rates and your loan terms, it's virtually the same in the US. I think we might have more lending facilities than you guys do, but it's the same numbers that you're looking at, like in the major cities, New York, Miami, LA, it's going to be 3-4 caps. You get a little further away from those and you get into the suburbs of those towns, you're going to see like the 5s to 8s. And then when you start really getting further away, you could see those double-digit cap rates, but you have to be careful. You might want to do government housing. You might want to deal with like the nurses, teachers, the people that, you know, are more likely to have a job. And in those markets, it gets a little funky because it stops making sense to rent, right? So it's like who you're really renting to at that price, right? Because it's cheaper to just own. So, you know, you have to be careful, but it's virtually sounds the same as New York, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. I think the biggest difference between Canada and the US, or one of the biggest differences, I guess there's 2 primary differences. But the biggest one for me that frustrates me is we don't have a 1031 exchange. If we had a 1031 exchange, like my real estate strategy would be so different. At least in my head, I feel like I'd have such a bigger portfolio.
So you're paying taxes right off the rip of whenever you sell.
So we don't sell a lot. I buy and hold.
Gotcha.
Buy, hold, refinance, right? Because like you're not paying taxes on the refi, at least the way it works in Canada. You don't pay any taxes on the refi proceeds as long as they go towards another investment.
Really? So you would pay taxes on the refi proceeds if you just went out and bought a boat?
Yes. So in essence, because what would happen is that interest would no longer qualify. So the interest you're paying on that debt would no longer qualify for tax deduction. So in essence, it's like you're being charged tax, right?
Listen, I gotta say, I love the USA. Yeah, because so for those of you who aren't familiar with the 1031 exchange program, essentially the profits that you make from selling the capital gains that you earn from selling a real estate asset can be reinvested into another real estate asset, and that tax will be deferred. So you could essentially defer infinitely as long as you keep reinvesting your profits back into like kind of real estate within a certain time period, and if you file paperwork. But that doesn't exist in Canada, and I know it doesn't exist in some of the European markets as well. And this is why I'm saying, like, it's really cool to talk to international folks and show them the benefits of investing in the States. Because you're nearby, so you understand it. Your market is very similar to ours. But like the people in South America, people in Europe, the people in China, they don't quite see those opportunities. So when you're able to show them, look, man, this is the beauty of owning American real estate, that's even another population of people that you could raise capital from. Because they have the same problem, as I said before, a bunch of money in a market that's highly volatile, right? Look at the Chinese millionaires and billionaires. Their currency is always, up and down. Same thing in South America. Like during coronavirus, I've seen like the Brazilian currency lose value by 20% in 2 months. Same thing in Colombia. The Colombian peso lost like 25% in 2 months. That's a major swing if you got money sitting around. It's crazy. And if you can, if you could give just like an overview of advice that you would give to anybody who's starting out, regardless of age, regardless of sex, what would that advice be? And how would you encourage somebody who's like on the edge of getting started? What would you tell them to do, and how should they get involved in this game?
Yeah, it's a great question. And my advice has evolved over time as I've gained experience and got counsel from others as well. For me, the number one thing you need to do if you're brand new to real estate, if you're a novice investor, is get really clear on what you're trying to accomplish with real estate. So you need to establish a SMART goal. And the way I really like to view it is actually in two parts. Have like an overarching kind of principle, a guiding North Star, and then try and reverse engineer that into a SMART goal with milestones. So the biggest struggle I see a lot of investors come to me with is this a good deal? Should I buy this property or wait for something else? And the problem is they've got no criteria to make a judgment on because they don't have a clear goal. Everyone starts off wanting to get into real estate and they're like, I want to get rich, or I want to make $1 million, or I want to quit my job. But what does that actually really mean? And we need to really dial in. Like, does it mean I want to quit my job and never do anything again and continue my current lifestyle? Because that is a different goal than I want to quit my job and I'm willing to work 20 hours a week in my business, and I want twice the lifestyle. Like the sort of deals that you need in order to build out your freedom look dramatically different. So my number one recommendation is just get really clear on your goals, because if you're not clear on your goals, are you really going to be willing to put in the hard work? Because to me, real estate is still hard work. It's a very simple concept, but there's no silver bullet. It's not a get rich quick scheme. In my opinion, it's a get rich for sure scheme. But like the timeline, I think, is actually quite long for a lot of individuals.
Exactly. And what's funny is, like, earlier in the conversation, you had said that one of the people that you learned from showed you that it was achievable and realistic. And I immediately thought, I was like, this guy is a SMART goal user, right? And I did a video on how to form SMART goals and use SMART goals and why they're important. So I'm going to insert a card for that, just so this is your first time hearing of a SMART goal, you know how to put together, a goal. So, it just shows you that if you're going to try to do anything, you need to be specific about what you're trying to do. Because if you just say something as blanket as, I want to be in real estate to get rich, what the hell does rich mean to you, right? Is it 10 million? Is it 100 million? Is it $1 billion net worth? What is rich, and what lifestyle does rich provide you or afford you? And the more specific that you get with what you're trying to achieve, the more you're going to be able to reverse engineer how to get there. If you're only looking to make $1 million, then the strategy and game plan to make $1 million is a whole lot different than making 100 million, right? So you need to know what is the destination that you're trying to reach, or else you may not even be building the right boat to get you from point A to point B. So I thank you for sharing that bit of advice. And for anybody that has any further questions or is interested in kind of getting to see more about how Matt thinks, Matt, just plug in your channel.
Absolutely. So find me on YouTube, Matt McKeever. And again, you'll find me on any social media platform. So feel free to reach out, whatever your preferred platform is.
Awesome, man. And once again, thank you for joining me here at Entp Life. It's been a pleasure interviewing you, learning about your market, learning your approach. It's very similar to mine, a similar mindset. And it just shows you that there's other people out there who are doing it, once again, from a very basic starting point, from college rentals and asking a friend's father, how do you achieve, to now owning what I would imagine to be a multi-million-dollar real estate portfolio. So you guys at home who are tuning in and trying to learn, this is something that you totally can do. Thanks once again for being here at ENTP Life. If you're not already a subscriber, make sure you hit that subscription button, turn your notification bell on, leave your questions and comments in the comment section below, and of course, slap a like on this video. I'm a beggar. Please, take care.